Okay, we'll go ahead and go live. Well, hello. I just wanted to touch base real quick, and this is Jim Morgan with Life's Copilot, and we have something we're pretty excited about. Michael Scott is CEO of PFS Professional Fiduciary Services and New Leaf National Foundation, and he and Jake Duvall are going to talk to us today about trust management. I think that's is that a decent way of trying to describe what we're dealing with here? A couple weeks ago, we had elder law attorney Jeff Stinson doing one of these, and he went through a great deal about the different kinds of trusts. So now I want to go ahead and I'll introduce Michael. Michael, you're going to introduce Jake, I guess. And so kind of tell us who you are, and let's get this thing going.
Sure. Perfect. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, definitely appreciate it. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us. My name is Michael Scott. I'm CEO of Professional Fiduciary Services and New Leaf National Foundation. New Leaf is a nonprofit organization that acts as trustee for our beneficiaries. Our primary focus is being a fiduciary for special needs trust, minors trust, and any first or third party trust, really. While most larger institutions have a minimum that they'll accept, typically 1 million, some 3 million, some even up to 5 million or more, we will review all cases, no matter how small, to ensure that you're getting the right planning that you need. Our primary function is to ensure the distribution of funds to our beneficiaries follows the court order, the master trust, or the wishes of the parent or the source of those funds. This is really in an effort to safeguard any benefits that you're getting and the longevity of those funds. Some types of benefits that Jake is going to speak a little bit more on could include Medicaid, Social Security disability income, food stamps, VA, HUD, or Section 8 for housing. But in order to maintain those benefits, the trustee's job, our job, is to ensure that all the rules and regulations are met, including things like income limits are not exceeded each month, which can even vary from state to state. So we provide all documentation each year for redetermination of benefits, as well as any tax documents that go along with that. But having the right partnerships to accomplish this task is extremely important. We have a network of third parties to help us accomplish our goals, as well as yours. First step, of course, is finding the right attorney to handle the planning. So someone like Jeff Stinson is a perfect example of this, is having that right first step in place. But the next step is having the right financial advisor, which is paramount to ensuring that the funds last as long as possible. In order for us to accomplish our goals, we need a financial planner that would ensure our beneficiaries' funds are invested appropriately. So we've selected and partnered with ARMIS Strategies to help us accomplish this. ARMIS assists in the strategic planning for our beneficiaries. While no two cases are the same, they take the time to ask the questions to learn about your specific situation and find the best plan for you and your loved ones. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to Jake Duvall with ARMIS Strategies. Jake is a subject matter expert in the field of advanced planning regarding insurance, trust, charities and foundations, estates, and other investment vehicles to help protect your future. Jake, the floor is yours.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike. My name is Jake Duvall. I work for ARMIS Strategies as well as Bison Advisors, which is the investment advisory component that works with New Leaf. But when I put on my ARMIS Strategies hat, my relationship with New Leaf is actually talking to individuals and their families, usually when they're about to receive a large inheritance or a legal settlement, or are planning to leave an inheritance behind to a loved one that may have physical disabilities. Where I really have to step in there is obviously an attorney that handles what they call special needs planning is somebody that's very valuable to, not only educate, but to help set up the channels to get a point to where you have, no fears that you're going to lose any kind of public benefits assistance, or you or your loved one is not going to have somebody actively looking out for their money. However, I am usually kind of the first point of contact with a lot of these clients to lay some groundwork on the financial planning aspect, which can be difficult if you're on a limited income and still needing, some of that special care that some government programs like Medicaid is going to provide. I'm also talking about the actual process of choosing a trustee, such, as New Leaf, where Mike works, talking about the fact that there are options there. It really depends on who you're going to be most comfortable with, as well as talking about a lot of some of the requirements that some trust companies may have versus other trust companies and how they operate and do business. Since I plan as a fiduciary, I do not have any incentive to send anything to one particular trust company. I talk about what's available. I recommend, a couple of trust companies or trustees to handle these things. And then we have interviews and we talk about what's going to be the best fit. As far as the financial planning and investment management side of things, what I do is a lot different than what somebody would be doing when they are investing for somebody's retirement. Generally, when you come into a large sum of money and there are challenges that enter your life, probably not allowing you to have any other source of income from work, or if you have a child that you're going to leave behind money for that will not have the ability to work and maybe just be on a limited income like Social Security, we talk about that. We look at that and say, hey, we can't invest this aggressively for growth. We need this to provide income to make sure that that person's needs are going to be met. If not for life, then for as long as possible, depending on the financial circumstances. We also take a look at things like life insurance on a caregiver, making sure that there's additional funds if you aren't able to leave behind a sizable inheritance to a loved one, or a loved one gets money and it's in a trust. We need to make sure that above and beyond that, there is some mechanism to make sure that they are taken care of. If you happen to leave, this world early, unfortunately, that you have that reassurance there that there's going to be money there, to be able to care for that person. Other than that, based on what I do, I also have had to learn a lot about the ins and outs of state Medicaid programs, in addition to Medicare, and a good bit about private insurance. I don't know everything that there is to know, but I do know a lot of the general guidelines that can be communicated a lot easier, and broken down. And, with a qualified elder law attorney to be able to back up that information. I've had attorneys tell me that I presented in a little bit easier to digest format, but that's also something that I do. As far as the services that I provide, I don't charge for any services that I provide. If I am the one, or my company is the one, that helps you set up a trust, we can offer to manage that money, be the investment advisor, compensated on. Or if I'm looking at a life insurance product, I'm compensated on that. If we're just talking about general advice, trying to put a best path forward or a plan, or just making introductions and kind of holding your hand through the process, introducing you to an attorney, introducing you to a trust company, that comes at no cost, because that's something that I'm passionate about doing and want to make sure that everybody has that resource available.
Well, excellent. Now, why don't you guys explain New Leaf? I understand that is the not-for-profit arm of your entity, or why don't you explain to us what that really is and who you guys are in that category, and who you serve and how?
Sure. So yeah, we do have the nonprofit side, which is where the trusts are held. And specifically when you get into special needs trust and minors trust, we have that non-for-profit side, and that's where the money really is managed. The professional fiduciary services, this is more the back end office, right? So there's always data entry. We've got disbursement coordinators. So when someone needs funds, and it could be something as small as a quick order on Amazon. It could be a video game maybe for their child, or a pair of shoes, all the way up to I need a new vehicle. I need to purchase a home. We have all the resources available to help people not only make those purchases, but also to make sure that they're not going to surpass spending those funds. They need them to last for, say, 10 years. and at the rate that they're requesting funds is going to deplete those funds within the next 5 years, we would have that conversation and let them know that, hey, when you first came on board, you wanted these funds to last for approximately 10 years, right? And this is not meant to be a financial advisor by any means. We are not a financial advisor. We're here to ensure that those funds last as long as humanly possible. We have the advantage of using someone like Jake to ensure that we are getting interest on those funds, that they're invested properly, and that we are meeting the full fiduciary responsibility. But the funds are all held in that non-for-profit, and then PFS, Professional Fiduciary Services, really just has the employees that do that back office data entry.
Well, one of the things that I personally am a trustee on. My uncle, he has an irrevocable trust that we have, and so I've been managing that. It is, there's a lot of little moving parts and stuff that go along with that, from what I have seen. And one of the things that I have heard, I'm not particularly worried about this, but I have heard that the number one lawsuit in families is the one family member that's the trustee, and then getting crossways, or somebody else getting crossways with how they perceive the funds were being used or what have you. So I could see, so you guys could help a family avoid, such conflict, from what I would understand on that. So how does someone determine, because there's so many different kinds of trusts. There's, that's what we talked about with Jeff a couple weeks ago. It was, it's in, by the way, if you're looking for that one, you can go into Life's Copilot, go into resources under video library. It's the top one right now. So anyway, you can find it. But you got irrevocable trust, you got revocable trust, you've got builder's trust, you've got, the child, care, there's so many different ones out there. You guys administer all of those or not?
Yeah, we do. And really the first step would be having that conversation with Jake to make sure that you're getting the right plan in place.
Okay.
Miller trusts are going to be usually something that probably doesn't require a institutional fiduciary like New Leaf. The same thing with revocable trust too. You can have somebody like New Leaf on a revocable trust, but usually you're seeing the person that creates the trust as the trustee for that until they pass, and then it becomes irrevocable. And then it's, I think, a good idea to name a trustee like New Leaf, where, to your point, Jim, you can name a family member to be trustee, but as you mentioned, it's a difficult job, and it's a complicated job for somebody that doesn't really know this stuff to be a trustee. And there's legal liability, and that's the thing to stress when I have clients that are saying, well, I can just have my neighbor do it and he won't charge me a fee. Why should I be paying a fee for this? And the answer to that is, if it is a company, a corporate trustee, or a nonprofit entity, they are required to have liability insurance, usually up to $1 million per incident. So there is money there to go get if that trustee mismanages the funds. Your neighbor down the street is not going to go buy a liability policy for this. So.
Yeah, I was good. And again, it comes down to, it gives you that little bit of a buffer, because it doesn't mean that you mismanaged it. It just means that somebody got mad about it because whatever.
Well, and it may not even be malicious. Like,
yeah.
They accidentally do it because you just really didn't know going into it. Like, people probably don't know that if you have an irrevocable trust and you're a trustee, you have to do a trust tax return.
Right.
That may be something that's lost in the shuffle. There's just things that you don't know, which, again, I'm not trying to advocate against, a family member serving as a trustee. I'm just saying that there are advantages to using a corporate or a nonprofit trustee, because they know what to do. And if they mess up, a court is probably going to look at them and say, well, you should have known what to do. So we need that liability. Your neighbor really didn't know what to do. That's a little bit more forgiving in a court's eyes, I would think, fiduciary malpractice case.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Like I said, those are some things that, and now you talked about the child, the child care trust for somebody maybe has a child that is disabled or what have you. I know that that's one of the big challenges that people have. So basically, so they would go with their attorney, whoever that would be, or do you guys help them get that set up, or how does that work if they don't know? If they just come, I don't know if they would come to you or they come to you through an attorney. I guess that's how do they find you?
That varies. If it is part of someone's estate planning, usually that trust is going to be created at death, unless you have money that you want to gift to grandkids. That may be an incentive to set up a trust like that, which that needs to be usually done through your attorney. You need legal advice to make sure that that's the best thing for you to do. Now, when it comes to actually setting it up, the attorney can write language that trust exists whenever it needs to be. It could be now, it could be later, or you could talk with somebody like Mike and New Leaf who have a trust document already written. It is what's called a pooled trust. So the document is already written. You join this pool via what's called a joinder agreement. And the real difference between a pooled trust and just an individual trust that an attorney writes just for you is that the investment component, the assets are pooled together and they're kind of divided into sub accounts. So it saves money on the investment side of things. The flip side to that too is if you use a pool trust, you got to use the trustee whose pool trust that it is. You don't have any options on that. And there's lots of different pool trust companies out there. I just happen to be biased towards New Leaf. But again, there's other options too that I know well that do a great job. So
Okay, so now I've heard a new word that I've not heard before. So okay, so now we have a pool trust. Okay, so that means is it basically, talk to me like I'm a fifth grader here. So basically, what I understand is it is a predetermined trust that already has all the language in it, and then your particular funds go into this pool of trust, but I guess it still would be separated by your funds versus it's not a mixture or commingling or what have you, is it? It's just
that's
they're just all operating under the same parameters and the same rules.
That's important to clarify because a pool trust doesn't mean if somebody else spends more money than they put in that it comes out of your share. That's not what that means. It's definitely subdivided. Where it is a pool is the fact that everybody's investment strategy within that pool is going to be the same. So it is going to fluctuate based on the market, based on that performance and what you have in there. That's mainly the reason for the pool. If you pay an investment advisor who's doing the exact same thing for 150 other people in the trust company, you probably should get paid less on each individual one is my belief. And I do this for a living because it's all pretty uniform.
Yeah, because it's basically what happens is I used to be the company I used to work with, we had 11 companies under one umbrella, and I was VP of sales for 5 of them. Okay. Well, the reason we could do that is we had the exact same systems in place in all of them. So it wasn't that difficult. It was kind of a plug and play. We'd bring something in, we put these systems in place on how we managed it. Okay. They were totally different businesses, but they still worked under one ecosystem, if that made any sense. So is that kind of what I'm listening to here? So basically this pool trust, here are the parameters, here are the rules, here's what it does, here's how it's managed, and it's just however many people are in it doesn't really matter.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's again essentially a more cost-effective side when it comes to the investment advisory stuff. Now a trustee's job, whether you do an individual or a pool, is going to be the same, just as hard as it would be anywhere, because it is one of the most difficult jobs. That's why I'm not one. So, but an individual trust, you're going to have more flexibility to choose who you want to have those investments done, which generally is probably going to come at a higher cost because you have to pay them and the trustee usually. So it's also going to be a situation to where with individual trusts, you can put more contingencies in as to who can serve. If you can have the ability to get rid of that trustee without going through a court. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. There's no one perfect solution. There's one that's going to be more cost effective. There's one that's going to have a little bit more flexibility because you're writing your own document. Those are really the primary differences.
Okay. So how does someone do people come to you from their estate planner, from their attorney, or do you then send them to those people? I mean, how do people find New Leaf? How does that come about?
So right now, I guess they're, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. One of their biggest client base is individuals that have been injured, have suffered a disability as a result of that, and are receiving legal settlements. Which the attorney that is litigating that case, the personal injury attorney, is calling me for that, and that's usually what's making referrals to New Leaf. However, if it's a case where we need an individual trust done, then I'm the one introducing the estate planning lawyer, whoever's going to be appropriate for that particular state that we're in, and they make sure that all those aspects are handled. In the event of doing just estate planning, which is probably what you guys' audience are going to be more consisting of, then yeah, the estate planning attorney generally does make the referrals, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick in getting referrals directly to the financial advisor. I have a designation, what's called a chartered special needs consultant, and families may want to call somebody like that because it's dealing with money. And then ultimately that conversation goes to, well, this does deal with money, but we need to get estate legal documents done. And that would then lead to an introduction to an elder law attorney, as well as Mike and New Leaf.
Okay. I just didn't know if people went to you directly, or if they were coming in from outside sources, or sent to you, or could it be either way?
Other financial advisors call me too to kind of assist in that. So there's things coming from there. I have elder law attorneys that call me as well, just for the investment component of it. I would say that most of the time referrals to particular trust companies like New Leaf would come from the person that is doing the special needs planning, whether it would be the lawyer or financial advisor that's qualified to do that.
Okay, I just didn't know if people were, maybe they watched this video, and so now they know about you guys, but they don't necessarily know which attorney they want to talk to. I didn't know if that was a means to an end as well. So I don't know if they could start with you guys, or if they have to start through another source.
Yeah, and they're welcome to call. I mean, if they happen to find us, and I'll certainly share our contact information, but if they contact us and say, I don't have an attorney, I don't know where to go, but I know I need to do this, we have a network that we can certainly get them connected. But
That's what I assumed. I assumed you guys had these, So,
absolutely.
So now, what would be? Why would someone not want to use a pool fund? Or
if they wanted their family or their current investment advisor to manage the money, because their current investment advisor is probably not going to be able to, unless the investment advisor has a relationship with the pool trust company and is able to develop their own pool, but there's time and cost with that. The other reason that you would do an individual over a pooled trust would be if you are looking to have an individual serve as the trustee as opposed to another company. Pooled trust the trustee has to be a nonprofit organization. It's required.
okay.
You can't be an individual and administer a pooled trust. So it really just comes to preference on that.
I know that a lot of banks do trusts as well, or oversee and manage trusts, or they have departments that do that. So that would be a for-profit then? Is that what that would be? Or
correct. So banks, institutions, they can be trustees for individual trust. My advice is, most banks that do trust do have a special needs department, but it is a very small department generally with the bigger banks that are going to be able to service these things. And when they have high volume and aren't able to staff out that volume, then it becomes, a little bit, you become a number.
Yeah.
I always recommend trust companies that are not bank affiliated, that have a focus, are actively looking for special needs trust opportunities, because they are difficult to administer. So if you pick a trust company that says this is what we do, it's because they have a heart for it and they want to continue to do it. So
One thing that I had a banker that runs the trust department for one of the big banks here in town tell me one time, but this was, I think we were over coffee or whatever, and she was telling me about something. Her sales pitch on why you use her versus like an elder law. You can have an attorney run your trust, just individual attorney. But her argument was, if that attorney dies or retires or whatever, then all of a sudden you've got an issue with your trust. Whereas with the bank, they have other people doing it. I'm assuming you have a team that's involved in it. So this was just a conversation I had probably 2 years ago with a woman over coffee, but it was, I remembered it, so anyway.
And I think she has a point, but I think that, covering every single base is important when it comes to things like this. So I think the attorney drafting the document, or whoever is helping them with this, having the conversation to say, hey, we want to use attorney X as the trustee who's drafting this because they have extensive knowledge and know how to do these types of trust. However, if that attorney decides to retire, let's talk about who is going to step in their shoes either after retirement or after they pass away. Let's think about what's the next best scenario. And then that's when you say, maybe we need to look at a bank or a trust company to fill this role, because we want somebody that's qualified to step in if they can no longer do it.
I was like, right now we're working with an attorney for my mom doing health POAs and all these different things, and the family's having all these questions about things. I'm going, guys, the attorney is trying to think of worst case scenarios, okay, and their job is to try to keep us out of court if everything falls apart. Okay, that's they're not there to go, well, you guys are going to get along. You've always gotten along. Well, they're there to cover that weird contingency out there that that's their job, so.
It's, when you talk to individuals that, have disabilities or have, suffered trauma or tragedy, they already know about the worst case scenario. So, solving for that before it happens, people don't like to talk about it, but, you got to get comfortable with it. So.
Well, I saw some statistics that 1 in 3 households have someone that's caring for someone that's disabled in some capacity. 1 in 3. That's dumbfounding to try to get your head wrapped around that. So 1 in 6 millennials is taking care of someone in the family full time. Okay, so that if you figure out how many millennials are, that's like 12 million. So that's a lot of people. Okay, so one less burden on them is to get something like this where the financial stuff is being cared for and it's not on their plate, to do stuff. Mm-hmm. When it comes to money distribution, you said, you were talking about that they could ask you for money. You can give it or not give it depending upon the circumstances of how the spend down compared to the time frame. What freedoms are people giving up in that they need to be aware of, and what is still available to them that's not going to feel quite so restrained, I guess, is what, because I would imagine a lot of people are afraid to turn their finances over. I know that a lot of seniors are probably afraid to turn their money over in their irrevocable trust to even a family member, or not to a stranger with fiduciary responsibility. I'm sure that there's that hesitancy. What am I going to be restricted on? So what kind of thoughts can you give me on that to help assuage those concerns?
I address that on. Coming off and trying to sell it is not the right way to go, because it's not a checkbook. I think it's important to be honest and upfront, because if you're making a decision to set up one of these types of trusts, it is a decision you can't change. unless a court says so. And I think being honest, being upfront and saying, listen, we can talk through the things that you might want to use, and we can tell you also what is absolutely a non-starter for one of these particular types of trusts. And if you're not comfortable with the arrangement, that's okay. Maybe it's not for everybody to have to use, but you also have to understand, if you want to have public benefits like Medicaid, this is one of your very few options that you have. You have to relinquish this, and make no mistake about it. When you set up a trust that's irrevocable, you are giving your property away. It is not yours anymore, because somebody else can tell you what you can and can't do with it. And I think approaching it, just being honest up front, but saying, listen, it's not the most ideal situation, but let's talk about some things that it can do. And let's try to see if we can work around some things that, you might want to do with it. Maybe we can before we put it in this trust, but we also have to watch and make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to jeopardize your ability to get on Medicaid, or some sort of waiver program.
Well, I think that one of the things that I think that is beneficial to people to understand, and this is, for me going through this with family members or what have you, is that money coming in from, like, say, Medicaid waiver or maybe a VA aid and attendance or what have you. Those are significant amounts of money. Okay. And they are, I guess you could say, they're the middle class long-term care plans. That's really what it comes down to, but if you don't have this set up properly, then and I still find that most people believe they have to spend every dime they have to qualify for those and be absolutely destitute. And that is not the case. And that's where it comes in. They may lose some flexibility on this process, but it's more flexible than $50 a month for all your spending money.
And that's absolutely right. And there's certain restrictions. I want to say in Indiana, if you're over 65, you have to use a pooled special needs trust. You can't do an individual one. And even then, Medicaid could assess a transfer of assets penalty. That's a reason you need, a lawyer that's an expert in this stuff to plan around those things. But even if it's not in a trust, you make a good point, Jim. It's you don't have to spend down every single dime, or you don't feel like you have to be rushed to become poor to get on public benefits assistance. These types of lawyers, they know how to do that stuff too, and they work with financial planners to kind of help ease that, because that is a stressful thing to have to go through. And Jim, I'm glad you mentioned VA aid and attendance. Unfortunately, from what I know, unless things have changed, if you have VA pension, if you weren't disabled or deemed disabled while you're on active duty military, a special needs trust doesn't protect that income. Aid and attendance as well. I don't know if they really count assets, but that's not something that is going to protect VA benefits, since that's a separate entity than the state Medicaid agency or Social Security.
It can, okay, but it can. I know it did 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I don't know now. The rules change constantly. Okay, so the reason we were able to get through Medicaid waivers because we had set it up for the VA, several years before. So there was moving assets. It was an asset protection thing, at that point. So, but I think 6 months after that we did it. Then the rules changed, and there was they have a different look back period and everything else. So, that's one reason I call elder law attorneys, because the rules change every year. So it's kind of like, I can't keep up with it, nor do I even want to, it's, I know I have phone numbers I could call. So, so what kind of things would you like to make sure that people understand walking away today, that that if there's something that you go, I constantly am running into people that do not understand this, and it'd really be beneficial to them, their family, whatever, if they understood this particular thing. Is there something out there that you'd like to make sure that they hear today?
If you're confused about it, You know, I know it's hard to pick an attorney because a lot of attorneys do estate planning, and you know, only a handful of those are really good at, you know, disability planning and things like that. There's a group called the Special Needs Alliance that you can Google that can give you a state by state directory on who's good at that. As far as the financial planning aspect of it, um, you know, you can probably easily search. Again, the designation is Chartered Special Needs Consultant. Find somebody in your area that has that designation, and talk with them. They can probably help you through these challenges. My contact information will probably be here too. If you're watching this, feel free to call me. I'm more than happy to, you know, share my time and knowledge with you and see if I can help. And then as far as the trust aspect is concerned, you know, if that's something you already know, you're going down that route for your family or for somebody that you know, call Mike directly. You know, talk about what New Leaf has to offer, because I always encourage, you know, talk to different trustees before you select one, because just like in irrevocable trust, that's going to be a pretty permanent decision. You have the ability to fire them, but the best course of action is to make the right decision the first time. And that could include talking to multiple folks. So
Very good. Michael, you have some things to comment, or?
Really, he hit the nail on the head, but I would say, you know, just like he said, is having the conversation is free. You know, it costs nothing just to make sure you've got the right plan in place. And, you know, I guess growing up, you know, my father instilled something in me that has always resonated is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So if you don't have something in place, you may not make it hard on yourself, but you're going to make it hard on the people that you leave behind. So keeping that in mind, and, you know, maybe you've experienced something like you're going through, and, you know, you appreciate the planning aspect and what it has to offer. So, you know, even if you haven't been through it before, be the first to take care of your family, and hopefully they're taking care of you.
Well, very good, gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. So we have another event coming up in a couple weeks. We've got on the 20th. This is going to be an interesting one. Heather Kirk is coming in to explain something. I have been trying to get someone to explain this to me for 2 years, and I'm very excited that we've got her coming in because she's very confident that she can do it well. And that is the Senior Living Tax Credit Program, where you can actually get senior living on through a tax credit basis to keep your payments way down, as opposed to whatever. I've heard of it. I know it exists. I don't have a clue how it works. So we're going to find out on the 20th. So I'm looking forward to that. So a lot of these, by the way, I'm always trying to figure out, you know, things that I don't know. So anyway, we provide them for people. So you can find, and this one will be recorded, or it is recorded, and we'll have, I'll send you guys both a copy of the video. Use any way you like to. And it'll also be on our Life's Copilot page under the resources under video library, and also will go out in next month's newsletter. So thank you very much, guys.
thanks,
Thanks, Jim.
appreciate you, man.
Take care. Bye-bye.